In this video, I'll show you how to make a no-filter paludarium that's super easy and low maintenance to keep. I'll take you through the entire build process and even show you how it looks after 6 weeks of growth. Here's the glass tank that I'll be using. I built it myself from an old aquarium, but I'll try and leave a link to something similar in the description. I've got a loose plan for this build, but one thing's for sure is that I want lots of plants growing under and out of the water. In order for these plants to grow healthy and strong, they're going to need some nutrients, so let's start there. This here is some regular garden compost, and I'm going to pour it into the base of the paludarium. This will provide the aquatic plants with the nutrients they need to grow healthy and strong. I'm trying to position the compost where I think I'll be planting the plants. I've left a gap on the left as that's where I'm thinking some rocks for the hardscape will go. One essential step to doing this method is to cap off the nutrient-rich compost layer. I'm using some sand from an old aquarium, but some fine gravel would work just as well. With the sand in, I'm giving it a light spray with some water to make it sit nice and flat. Now it's time to start work on the hardscape. I was doing some gardening a few weeks back and I dug out this root. Straight away I knew that I had to use it in escape, and I think this is the perfect opportunity. I think it looks best over on the left side, but it needs something under it to give it a bit more support and to fill out the space. I think these lava rocks will be perfect for the job. They've got loads of texture on their surface, which will add some nice detail in a small scape like this one. I'm struggling to get the wood in place, so I'm going to have to break off a few branches to make it fit properly. I'm not going to throw these branches away as they'll come in handy later. Now I can continue building out the hardscape with some more lava rocks. After a bit of trial and error, here's what I've settled on. It is pretty basic, but I like how it looks and I think it will work great for this paludarium. At the moment, the wood is only balanced and will fall off after only a slight nudge. To prevent this from happening, I'm securing it in place using the super glue and tissue method. I'm wedging a small amount of tissue between the contact points, soaking it in some liquid type super glue and then leaving it to dry for a few minutes. The result is a strong bond that's plant and animal safe. I'm adding a few different sizes of gravel to the sand to give it a bit more detail and texture. Now it's time to start getting the plants inside, starting in the water. I'm going to start by planting in some crypt parva. This is a small species of crypt that stays nice and small and fits the scale of this paludarium perfectly. I'm mainly planting it right up against the rocks to create a nice natural transition down into the foreground. The next plant that I'm going to add is this dwarf hairgrass. I've given it a rinse and split it into smaller portions that I can now plant into the tank. I really like the fine grassy leaves of this plant, and I'm hoping that with some time it will breach the water's surface and start growing immersed. The next plant to go in is going to be this Anubias. Its large deep ridged leaves will be a nice focal point. I'm also planting in a few more smaller species in the gaps between the rocks. Unlike most of the other plants, these don't need to be planted in the substrate and they'll get their nutrients by pulling them from the water column. Aquatic plants are prone to drying out, so a light spray down every now and then is essential. To bring even more detail to the foreground, I'm going to plant in some of this glossostigma. I love the small round leaves of this plant and its carpeting tendencies. With time, it will slowly spread throughout the sand, bringing a more natural look as it does so. I know I've added some Anubias, but I don't think this scape would be complete without some Bucephalandra. Once again, I can plant these by simply wedging them in gaps between the rocks. I think that concludes the planting underwater, so let's move on up above the water. Here I've got some Photonia and Peperomia. To be able to plant them inside, I need to get them down to their bare roots, as the excess soil would most definitely cause algae problems. With the roots nice and clean, they can now be planted inside. Planting them really couldn't be simpler. I'm simply placing them behind the rocks where their roots are underwater and the rest of the plant is above. The roots of these plants will pull nutrients from the water and will eventually make their way down through the sand into the nutrient-rich compost at the base. It's worth mentioning that not every terrestrial plant thrives in conditions like these. From my experience, plants that can be propagated in water almost always do great. If you're unsure if the plants you've got will work, just drop them in the comments and I'm sure me or someone else will be able to help you out. These are some of the twigs that I broke off from this root earlier. I can simply place these inside the Paludarium and they instantly add a whole lot more detail. The Paludarium is almost finished, but there's still a couple things that need to be done. I'm filling the tank up with some regular dechlorinated tap water. With that done, I can now add the final plant. This is an aquatic species of moss that also grows great outside of the water as well. One thing to keep in mind in an open Paludarium like this one is that the moss would do best if it's in contact with the water, as this will allow it to wick the water up to stay hydrated. If not, you will have to spray the moss down regularly to stop it from drying out. I don't know about you, but I think this tank is looking great. As there's no filter, I'm going to be relying on the plants for the filtration. This is why I've tried to get as many in as I can, as it will give us the best chances of success. Now I'm going to place it on the Nano rack where it sits under an LED light and leave it to grow in for a few weeks. Six weeks have passed and I'm glad to say that this no filter Paludarium is doing great. In that time I've only done 3 water changes and yet the ecosystem seems to have balanced itself really nicely. All the plants underwater have got lots of new growth and there's only really some algae on the older leaves. As for the plants above the water, they seem to be doing just as well. The peperomia has sent out a bunch of new leaves, and even the anubias has sent out a new leaf, which shows that it's thriving even though it's growing above the water. They're quite hard to spot, but there's a colony of these tiny snails living throughout the water. They predominantly feed on biofilm and algae, which helps keep the tank nice and clean. Despite the occasional water change and topping up, this Paludarium has been extremely low maintenance and it certainly has been a joy to keep. I really hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even inspired you to try something similar yourself.